Did you guys study Marx? No, I know, stupid question. Of course you studied Marx. Every good citizen studies Marx. But I was gonna ask, because despite my extensive reading of Das Kapital, I still haven't found answers to all of my questions, and maybe somebody can help me out here. Can zombies be communist? Hi, my name is Lager, and Hrot is a boomer shooter set in the single most hopeful period of human history. 1986 Czechoslovakia after an unspecified disaster. Surrounded by horrors beyond comprehension, otherwise known as Czech cultural references, you must advance through the glorious but beleaguered homeland to cleanse it of monstrosities that threaten true and proper socialist moral fiber. You are the last beacon of sanity and good taste in the world, and the final protector of true Slavic values. Mandatory alcoholism, caring about dogs more than people, communist homosexuality, and brutalist architecture. Therefore, it is your duty to restore the nation into the rightful hands of its socialist establishment through the use of any and all weapons you can find, destroying the common imperialist evils of the age all the way throughout. Some might say that doesn't sound very hopeful, but those people just haven't embraced the Soviet Union's friendship enough. Not to worry, we'll muckle them at some point. For everyone else in the audience, welcome to your excursion into deep communist Czechoslovakia lore, which I, as a fake German myself, am perfectly positioned to inflict upon you. So, as a proud holder of the military readiness badge, it is time for you to put on your non-functional gas mask, attach filters 8 years out of date, load your VZ-52 pistol, and get to work! Retro shooters, often lovingly referred to as boomer shooters, named after the audience they attract, of course, are a subgenre of first-person shooters that make it their explicit goal to rekindle the exact feeling you had playing Doom and Quake entries back in the 90s. Things have changed since those times, admittedly, but not so much that a modern audience might not find anything here besides the nostalgia. There are good reasons a remaster of Quake 2 more than 2 decades after its initial release manages to achieve overwhelmingly positive ratings on Steam, and a lot of them stem from just how simple and practical that game is in its design. Boomer shooters, as a rule, aim to keep that simplicity alive. Without the colossal burden of high graphical fidelity and design by committee, what you get is tight focus on what truly matters. Instead of million-dollar motion capture animations, photorealistic graphics, and the latest in money extraction techniques, the core is a tried and tested gameplay loop. A suitable amount of pixels, a blisteringly fast sprint through a level in search of colorful keys, comfy shooting resulting in comfier blood splatters, and an absolutely joyous sound effect whenever you unload the mandatory double-barreled shotgun into the gut of the nearest monstrosity. By falling back on well-explored design and technology, they instead gain the ability to take an idea and run with it, however deranged or out there that idea might be. In Hrot's case, that idea is combining 1986 Czechoslovakia with the horror of an unspecified disaster. The future under communism is extremely bright, which is to say it wouldn't pass by an American border guard without triggering a random search, but it might max out your Geiger counter. Insanity roams the streets, gunfire fills the air, and nobody's 100% on what the fuck is going on anymore. Unlike many other boomer shooters, this one doesn't stray from the limited color palette decisions Quake 2 made for the sake of technical constraints, even when those constraints no longer exist, for Czechoslovakia is a dark and cursed land, where brown and gray are the only colors left. Its arsenal is very Doom-like in its construction, and though there are physics, they affect only a bare handful of items. The vast majority of the scenery is set in stone. Hunting for ammunition in nooks and crannies of that scenery is not just a learned skill on a high enough difficulty, it's a requirement. The whole thing is wonderfully chasm. This philosophy of returning to the roots has brought us many triumphs. New Blood's entire catalog, for one, but Hrot takes it significantly further than anyone before it has ever dared to. On a technical level, this triumph is coded from absolute scratch in Pascal. The entire engine is handmade with all the oddities that entails. Low-resolution textures jitter across models with a polygon count low enough to give a Crytek developer an aneurysm. A very small amount of cleverly used assets allows the game to fit on a CD, and the AI is as simple as it could possibly be. Improvements are made over 1996, yes, especially in terms of physics and sound quality, but not being forced to listen to compressed crunchy noise so the whole thing could fit in a few floppies is an improvement. Greybeard purists be damned. But simply being a technological artifact wouldn't exactly be enough for a game to be worth playing. Getting Doom to run on hardware that was never intended for it is practically a pastime of its own for scientists, and as crucial as the sentient god entity Romero's tech was in getting this whole thing off the ground, it's no longer the be-all end-all. Which is where Hrot goes on to do something entirely unexpected. It takes an entire nationality and shoves it where the game's character should be. What results is, to an outsider, entirely fucking unrecognizable. Hrot requires so much context to truly comprehend you might as well be using it as a citizenship test. Which is all well and good, because at the very least I can use it to prove that I'm not actually German. It's not just the signs being in check that tell you where this takes place. The weaponry, clothing, locations, all of it is period accurate. Every step is chock full of references only people allowed to play this game, which has been decided by committee to be Czechs and potentially Slovaks, pending access to the internet has arrived in that country yet, above the age of 30, could ever hope to understand. The absence of toilet paper? That's canonical. It's why there is a special edition of Hrot OST near every toilet. Every gun that passes through your hand, not just real, iconic, because that's the fucking bicycle pump gun, the VZ-52, and a Hussite flute. And that's the correct fucking names. Whatever international designation historians use is wrong. Bite me. The levels, those leak out into your schizophrenia, actually. You go through those every day on your way to work. The enemies? Well, that one's Lenin's head. These are wearing state-supplied gas masks. That's definitely a Hussite, and if you haven't murdered a couple of rats in the sewers, are you really living in a major metropolitan area? And that's not speaking of being allowed to shoot increasingly deformed Gustav Husak to death multiple times. Thanks, Zbigniew, that really scratched an itch. It's hard to find an angle from which Hrot isn't painfully Czech once you see it. Real places serve as a basis for pretty much every level, down to details like the usage of period-accurate names for metro stations or signs directing you through your tour of the very real Fortress Dobroshov. War with the Newts isn't likely to be something even people well-versed in early science fiction know about, but here, an homage to it takes up an entire level. More obscure references to movies, books, places, and common experiences under the boot of Comrade Teacher of Literature just kind of seamlessly meld into the experience, entirely without care whether they land with the audience or not. Even the difficulty slider is a joke, though explaining why Blue Book works so well is a lot easier than explaining the cremator. Hrot's serious tone melts surprisingly well with its horror atmosphere precisely because it's based on the culture of 1980s Czechoslovakia. The culture of a society that was living under foreign occupation, amidst brutalist architecture and continued existence of political prisoners, and kept laughing about how silly the whole thing was. The atmosphere is thick and the whole thing is oppressive and cruel, and this is a serious game. And then come out of here goes splat right in front of your goddamn face, because the sheer absurdity of something like that happening is why the Eastern Bloc is worth laughing at. So yes, Lenin lived, Lenin lives, and Lenin will live, and Mayakovsky is lucky he's not here to see what I've done to his favorite boy. Under all those layers of referential humor, though, there is a genuine shooter worth playing. The custom engine might intentionally date the game, but dated is not even in the same postal code as bad. When it isn't purposefully undercutting itself, it's genuinely atmospheric and creepy, even dipping directly into horror at times. Restrictive graphics and inspiration drawn from real places are never enough to smother the genuinely excellent level design on display. It might be scratching those childish fantasies of what a firefight would look like in the place I went to on a school trip, but it never forgets that the arenas have to be interesting. Sure, it's prone to monster closets, but it understands that it uses them not to make you suffer, but to constantly keep you guessing where the next fight might take place. That plays into the atmosphere of it though, because that's absolutely the intentional result of Hrot being technologically stunted. It's supposed to take place in the communist equivalent of a happy place, and letting you feel it is not just the job of the browned out visuals and the very well made, by the way, oppressive soundtrack, but it's also the job of everything else. Nobody's coming to help, none of the gas masks any of the enemies have on them seem to have helped, the helicopters are here to shoot you, not save you, and the bits that aren't like this are a fever dream at best. Hell, barely any of the enemies speak recognizable sentences, they just make sounds. But even those sounds aren't exactly human anymore. All of that just to set you up to fight a piece of gym equipment that shoots rockets. The enemies that charge you are jokes, yes, but at the same time they make for actually interesting and meaningful opposition. The flying Lenin hats exist to make sure you account for the third dimension. The riot gear VB ogres keep you moving. The chemical hood wizards make you watch your back. Shemik here is a bullet sponge, and the bulldozers attacking you not just protože bagr, but because you're never allowed to stop paying attention to your surroundings. When the full variety is thrown at you, they suddenly cover one another's weaknesses, and optimal strategies change not just based on who's closest to you, but how much cover there is, distance between you and targets, and ammo in your guns. Coupled with the arsenal, which straddles the line between the easily understood and the weird with fascinating efficiency, the somehow ingenious choice of making grenade throws your alt-fire, genre-mandated secret ammo and health stashes, and the sheer absurdity that is armor pickups being not just clean briefs, but socialist labor awards and money, Hrot is the kind of game that leaves a lasting impact despite how short it is. It takes joy in the insanity of first-person shooters as a genre, the small details of your electric gun charging when you brush up against a high-voltage line, and then discharging when you fire it underwater, only to wink at maybe the couple thousand of its Czech players with a cultural touchstone. There is something profoundly magical about that. Being able to condense a small part of the culture and identity of a nation into maybe 8 hours of video game. It might not visually seem like much, until the realization hits that that's the whole point. It might seem like just absurd humor, until you're fighting Gustav Husak the second time, and this time it's because he fucked up the only reason a denizen of Prague would ever come out all the way to Moravia. It seems like the message is to just be silly and be Czech. Except then, you shoot a totalitarian strongman riding a bear to death, give him a gastroscopy, and repair the Prague astronomical clock with parts you rescued from his guts. Hrot isn't just a game, it's a lot like its name. An untranslatable quagmire of a concept. It could mean point, or maybe spearhead. It could be talking about sticking people with sharp objects. It could be talking about the situation being blown out of proportion. But personally, there is one translation that rings truer than all others. For you see, Hrot is peak.